Alright, hello. I'm going to go over the notes real quick of the conversion factors between the different type of special right triangles. So we're going to focus first on the shorter one, which is the 45, 45, 90. Because we have two angles that are the same measure, that means we have an isosceles triangle, which means these two sides are the same length. So if the bottom leg is x, that means the other leg is also x. These are both just the legs. Because it's from across from the right angle, this side is the hypotenuse. We want to figure out how big that is. In notes on Thursday, we saw that we would have the Pythagorean theorem saying x squared plus x squared equals c squared. So 2x squared equals c squared if we take the square root of both sides. We get c, which is the hypotenuse, is x times the square root of 2. So that means if we start at the leg, let's just say this leg right here, and we want to get to the hypotenuse, we would multiply that leg by the square root of 2. So, for example, if this leg was 4, the leg is 4, we would multiply it by the square root of 2, which would be nothing really to do here. It will just turn into 4 times the square root of 2 is the hypotenuse. Likewise, if we're going from the hypotenuse to the leg, instead of multiplying, we divide by the square root of 2, which I've shown here by multiplying by the reciprocal. So if this is 6, we would times that by this fraction. So we get 6 on top, square root of 2. On Monday, you'll watch a video that says we don't like this any radicals on the bottom. I'll show you how to fix that up. But for right now, you can just say that's 6 over the square root of 2. The 30, 60, 90 triangle is a little bit more complicated. In class, we saw the quilting block and how we have an equilateral triangle here. The 60 matches the 60 over here and the 60 over here. We have an equilateral triangle, so if this is x, this is also x, which means the whole side is 2x, which means all of these are also 2x. Which means we can try to find this side right here. This is the short leg. This is the long leg. This is the hypotenuse. So as we saw in class, we did short leg plus long leg equals hypotenuse. Those are all squared, so we get x squared plus b squared. Remember, we have to distribute that square. We get 4x squared. Subtract our x's so we can combine them. So we get b squared equals 3x squared. Square root both sides, so we get b equals x times the square root of 3. Usually we put the numbers out in front, but as we saw other down below, I like, and most math teachers like putting the x out in front, so that way we know the x is not inside the square root. So now that we have this all, I'm going to kind of erase some extra information here. We know that the long leg is x times the square root of 3. So how we use this is, if we're starting with the hypotenuse and going to the short leg, right, hypotenuse, short leg, we have to multiply that by a half to get it. So if the hypotenuse is 4, we do 4 times 1/2 to get 2. So the short leg is 2. Likewise, if we're going from the short leg to the hypotenuse, let's just say the short leg is 5, we would have to multiply the short leg by 2 to get to the hypotenuse. So that would be 5 times 2, which is equal to 10, and that's the hypotenuse. The other kind of setups are a little bit more complicated. We said the long leg is x times the square root of 3. The the short leg is x. So to go from the long to the short, we have to multiply by 1 over the square root of 3, aka dividing by the square root of 3. So for example here, if the long leg is 7, And we want to find how big the short leg is. We have to take the 7, multiply by this fraction to get 7 over the square root of 3. Likewise, if we went the opposite way, if we have the shared and we want to get the short and we want to get the long, let's just say the short, we can make this a little interesting and say that the short is 2 times the square root of 3. So we take the short, 2 times the square root of 3, multiply that by the square root of 3. So that means we get 2 times the square root of 9, which would be 6. I'll go over that again in notes on Monday, but just a little precursor for what this unit will end up looking like. And we said, so we multiply that by the square root of 3. The most complicated one is going from the long to the hypotenuse, or going from the hypotenuse to the long. Going from the long, we would need to multiply it by 2 over the square root of 3 to get to the hypotenuse, because we're starting at the long, going to the short, then going to the hypotenuse. If we look above, from long to short, we multiply it by 1 over square root 3. From short to hypotenuse, we multiply it by 2. So if we combine those two steps together, we get one step here. So let's say our long is 8. We would do 8 times 2 over square root 3 to get 16 over the square root of 3. So reverse order, if we have the hypotenuse and we want to go to the long, we would need to flip that fraction, so square root 3 over 2. So for example, if we start off with 10 as the hypotenuse, multiply that by 3 over the square root of 3 over 2. So we get 10 times the square root of 3 over 2, but we can reduce that down to 5 square root of 3. So that's our little review notes of our triangles. We cover that in class on Thursday. You practice that with the sub on Friday. I have probably posted this video on Friday. I just want to go over this real quick before I make the video for the other side of this